friend? My name is Misha, and I really want to tell you about Electroball, an urban adventure set in the city of electric intrigue. We fight robots, channel magic, and make powerful allies, all to solve a mystery that can mean the fate of the entire city. Episodes are under 90 minutes long and published weekly, so come join us for Electroball over at Dice Carnival. Available wherever you listen to podcasts. Alright, I'll let you get back to your show.
Welcome back to Beholder to Know One, a D&D podcast. Greg and I are here with a very special guest, Tanner Wilson.
Hi there, folks. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Tanner created a game called Magic School Mystery, and it's coming live on Kickstarter tomorrow, August 4th.
Yes.
And we're here to talk about that.
Oh, well, thanks. A lot of exciting things are happening. And I'm very passionate about this game. I think it's going to be pretty cool.
So tell us a little bit about you and your background in the realm of gaming.
Let's see. Well, I'm Tanner, and I suppose, like everyone, it started by playing games. Of course, I started with Dungeons and Dragons in high school, and, I'm still playing that. It's a great game, and I have fallen in love with role-playing games. And I think I started as a hobby for fun with my friends, making our own games and modifying D&D. And from there, it kind of transformed into trying to do bigger and bigger projects. And, we're not too big yet, but we're getting there.
Yeah, definitely taking the right steps in order to get to somewhere big. I know I don't have the know-how or anything like that to make my own game, even if taking a base system and tweaking it, that's not something I can take and make something of my own that way.
Well, right, because it's all small steps, because, every step it can be fun, and, we got into it, and we're still into it because we're doing it for ourselves for fun. And about 2 years ago, we brought our first game to Kickstarter, and that was called Fuel Priest, and that was a really interesting learning experience. And since then, I've been excited to try it a second time with a new game.
Awesome. What was that first one you said it was called? Fuel Priest?
Fuel Priest, yeah. It was about airplane pilots that explode.
Oh, okay.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll have to look into that.
I know that with D&D, at least, it's very challenging sometimes to get the CR or the challenge rating done correctly. So a good way to start for, if you want to get this started, I would think would be take a normal creature that's already balanced and then just tweak it a little bit and see how it works, play it out. Change their attacks and then give them a little bit more HP or give them a resistance or two and tweak it to fit your story. And sometimes you just have to change them enough that it's more interesting. I did a game the other day there was an ooze, and instead of a normal gray ooze, it was a banana cream pudding ooze. And it was the same concept. It was just...
Did it taste like banana cream pudding?
Yes, it did. It was deliciously dangerous.
That wasn't the only food type item that you fought, though, the other day, was it?
Nope, there was also a cheese elemental and a gummy owlbear.
There you go.
Well, that's some dangerous stuff.
I did not make any of them, but I found them on Pinterest, and it was all very entertaining.
But I think you're right. It's the small parts of just tweaking encounters first, and also kind of watching how, when you tweak encounters, it changes how your players respond to it emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's, you have mechanics, but then based on the mechanic, the players are going to feel differently about it, regardless of actually the hard science of how the numbers are going to be rolling.
Right. And you could tweak it to fit your story too. So if you have a more sci-fi-esque game, instead of having them all have swords, maybe give one of them a gun and just tweak it to fit the same concept of a longbow, but it's a gun. It doesn't have to follow all these other protocols if you just want it for fun. Obviously, if you want to publish it and things like that, then there might be some more tweaking necessary, but it's a good place to start.
No, I agree. I think reflavoring items, particularly in D&D, opens up so many possibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. I always I mean, realistically, if you're building your own thing, you don't even need to like draw inspiration from anything. You can just kind of make whatever you want.
And the key part about, different settings and different types of stories is because the mechanics themselves, they make reality for your players. And so you might want to start adding small mechanics in here and there that would change how your players' reality acts to fit the setting they're in. Because, D&D is a very broad game. It can play lots of different styles of games.
Mm-hmm.
But you can put some small mechanics in there to then affect them like emotionally, and so they understand this is the genre we're in. In this genre, we do this, but we don't do that because that's how it's always been whenever you look at the TV shows.
Right.
True. I always like adding little tiny things into the characters that I create, or if I'm DMing something, just adding little tiny quirks and stuff into characters. Like one of the very first games I played was believe it was a Journey into Phandalin, or it was like the pre-made D&D 5e.
Minds of Phandelver?
That's the one, thank you. My character, basically, every time he was an old hermit and lived out in the woods by himself for many, many, many years, so he didn't have a lot of social interaction or anything like that. So the entire game, every time it was my turn in combat or something, I would have to... I made it so that I would have to roll an insanity check on a d20. And then if it was low, then my character would just do something completely unhelpful for the party and just run around and do whatever. But if it was higher, obviously, then I'd be able to dictate what I would actually like to have done. So just adding little quirks like that into characters and stuff is always super entertaining.
Oh yeah, I think the whole game just opens up when you realize that these are all just tools that you can sculpt and change.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
Or what should people expect from Magic School Mystery? Is there anything they should go into it knowing, like this is what the style is, or just like a brief overview?
Well, sure thing. So, Magic School Mystery, you're playing students, you're at a wizard school, and you have to solve a mystery before it's too late. So, it's very much a lighthearted, juvenile mystery-solving game where the players, their job is to make mischief and get in trouble and go to class, and then at the end of the day, figure out who done it.
A good whodunit mystery. Gotta love those.
Exactly, yeah. And along the way, you're going to be casting spells and interacting with magical creatures and exploring this, magical castle that you get to create.
That's awesome.
So we did read through the playtest copy that you sent us, so thank you.
Yes.
We saw that you use a D10 for this game, which normally D&D uses a D20. What made you go with a different system using just the D10 versus using what was previously built in another game?
That's a really good question. And I was originally trying to decide between a D10 and 2 D6. And the reason why I went with the D10 is because it's actually very similar to the D20 in how swingy the results can be. There's not really a solid average that you're going to land on. And so that's actually something I'm taking from Dungeons & Dragons that I really liked for this game, is that you have the highs and the lows. But the reason I didn't use the D20 was because everyone is very familiar with D20 systems. And these systems come with a set of, preconceived notions of how it's going to be played. And when you put a D20 in someone's hand, they're learning, their training already kicks in, they know what they're supposed to be doing with it. But if you take the D20 out, you're telling them this is going to be different, expect something different, don't use the same expectations or strategies with this type of game. And I guess finally, maybe the most important reason I used the D10 was after a great deal of testing and scientific research, discovered it's the most magical feeling dice.
Okay, interesting.
I do like that you took out the D20 because I didn't even think about it, but that is true because as soon as I hear D20, I'm like, 1 is a crit fail, 2 is a natural 20. No matter what game I play, if I roll a D20, that's where my mindset's got to go.
Right. Mm-hmm.
For sure, and I believe it's isn't Starfinder or I'm all over the place right now. No, not Pathfinder.
Shadowrun?
That's the one. Shadowrun. Doesn't that use D6s instead of a D20?
Shadowrun
Yes,
does
it does.
use D6s, yes.
Lots of
Okay.
D6s.
Like
Yes,
up
lots
to
of them.
20-something D6s.
Jeez, I didn't realize it went that crazy.
That comes with its own feelings and notions, when you have a handful of d6, that means something entirely different to whoever's rolling that.
Very true.
Mm-hmm. I do like that system, but it is a lot and excessive sometimes, just because it's like, okay, I'm doing this roll, I only have 3d6s, I have a very small chance of passing, where if you're really good at it, you're like, I have 26 d6s, and then the sound of all the dice hitting the table at once is just like thrilling. But then you still have like a really good chance of rolling a lot of successes.
Right. And like you said, it seems a bit excessive. But that fits the game, because in that game you can play someone who opens their mouth and a shotgun comes out.
That's going to be my next character.
Oh, God. Makes note to self if we ever play a Shadowrun game.
I have it written down already. Don't worry.
What games, books, and personal decisions inspired you to make this game particularly?
Well, I think we all grew up with a certain book series, and the magic school genre is just a wonderful genre. But beyond that, I'm actually a particular fan of this strange little show that you can find on Netflix called, let's see, what is it called? I wrote it down. The Worst Witch. I think it's based on a book series, but you can find it on Netflix, and it's this really cute episodic TV series about, a wizard school and this young girl who goes there and is always getting in trouble, always making mistakes. And I think it's just really cute. So setting-wise and tone-wise and story-wise, those are the stories I wanted to tell. And actually, I wanted to tell it for a game night with my friends. And this is, half a year ago, right when quarantine was beginning, actually. And we were looking for something that would tell these stories, but we couldn't find one that did everything we wanted it to. So we went ahead and made our own to do that specifically.
Worst Witch, you said?
Worst Witch, yeah.
All right, that's another one I'm going to have to write down. I have a list.
I looked it up. It's written and illustrated by Jill Murphy from 1974.
Oh, geez.
Was the original book series.
Right. So there's a cool thing that I've learned by researching this game is the whole magic school genre has been around for a while, and it actually is a genre all by itself.
That's fair. I know that a lot of people close to our age would immediately jump on another very popular series that we won't mention. But I'm actually pleased that it came from a different series.
Oh, for sure. Same.
Oh, yeah. Because, we stand on the shoulders of giants, and, we can be inspired by the things that we love, but it's always important to have, at the end of the day, your own take on things.
Yeah, absolutely. Make it your own.
So when trying to make this, I think some of the role-playing games that inspired me, well, of course, Dungeons & Dragons. It's always there in my background, and I'm always going to look back at it fondly. There's some other games that I really took ideas from that I quite enjoyed. And it was at the beginning of quarantine. I had nothing to do. And my roommate has this huge bookshelf full of indie RPGs. Like,
nice.
Tons of them, from, just from Zines to, more well-known ones. But I'm particularly inspired by a game called Apocalypse World, which was in terms of indie games, is pretty popular. And I'm also really inspired by a game called Damn the Man, Save the Music, which is this clever little game where you play as your employees at a music store in the 90s. And the store is running out of money. It's going to close at midnight and be done forever. So you have to save the store before then.
Interesting.
And what I really took from that game was how condensed an experience that was. It's a very specific storyline. And to accomplish that game broke play into specific scenes. Now, you could still, of course, make choices as a role player and see the story go different places, but everything was structured like you would see a scene in a TV show. There was a beginning and then an end, and then you go to the next one. And I felt that was very important to bring to a school-based game.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. With that one, is it all just one session, or can it branch out through multiple sessions?
I think that particular one is one session.
Oh, nice. Nice condensed game. I like that.
Right.
That kind of reminds me of Hunt a Killer, which is a newer idea based off these escape room type games, where you have 6 different sessions, but it's all one theme. And each week you get a little bit closer to whodunit. My best friend and Greg's wife, we played that game one night, and it was just so much fun. And it was like we figured it out. Like we were able to cross out one suspect, and you feel like you're actually an investigator for this mystery. So it's a very similar concept. Like it's a niche, so to speak, and you can't really play it ever again, but that's okay, and it makes it fun.
Right, exactly. Because, we all have busy lives, and, we got the D&D campaign that's going on for like half a year or a year. And, sometimes it's fun to take a break, and you want somebody that can deliver a solid story, but knows when to leave. And is this over?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I play video games constantly, so that's more my niche as far as that's concerned. But D&D and all that works really well as well for, entertainment value.
I was going to say, well, you can Magic School Mystery, you can definitely play more than one session. You will go through like the different years at school, but it is only designed to go up to the third year. And one of the reasons it's done that is because it's very, I'm sure we've all done it, where we've had these long campaigns and then they just fizzle out.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And we are left feeling incomplete, and like it, for me, that's a particular pet peeve of mine.
Right.
Yeah. I get that.
I've had so many games that just stopped, and I still miss them to this day.
Mm-hmm.
But
right,
we moved on to new games, and I honestly I've been playing D&D or TTRPG games for almost 18 years now, and I think honestly last month was the first time we finished a campaign.
Very cool.
And it's technically not even done because it was like the first book of the campaign, and then it goes into Mad Mage. We finished Dragon Heist.
Right. Well, congratulations.
But it was so rewarding.
I know, right? It's, all the loose ends are tied up. Most, character plots are, have begun and ended.
We're just like, okay, we're good. We could take a break. We have like 2 to 5 years for our characters to do their own thing before we have to go back into the grind of being heroes again. But it was so rewarding.
2 years real time.
Probably, honestly.
Yeah, and that campaign we were running for, I think it was a year and a half, almost.
Almost 2 years.
Yeah, it was a very, very good feeling to put all that to rest.
What level did you guys get up to?
6th.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Because the Dragon Heist is technically 1st to 5th level, and then you go into Mad Mage, which is 5th to 15th, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And we got up to 6 because we technically did stuff that we weren't supposed to do, since we were more RP focused. Then let's get the end goal, kill the boss, and stuff like that.
I think Wizards of the Coast released a poll or some data at one point where they had surveyed how often different levels were played, and the results were significantly levels 1 through 3 were way off the charts. Everyone, that was the highest amount they played, and then it drops steeply as it gets up to 6th and then 7th, and then barely anyone ever gets to play beyond 10th.
Yeah, I think we've played one game at 20th level, and it was a birthday one shot for my birthday last year.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, everybody come in, bring a 20th level character. That's all you need to know. And
those are always very fun.
I turned into Tiamat and got to have fun fighting the party.
Yeah, it was interesting to say the least.
I had fun, and that's what mattered.
I'm sure you did.
It was my birthday. I was like, I get to go kill all my friends now.
My friends and I, we used to do something called After D&D.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would be late at night, we were already in the game, and we still want to hang out. So we make 20th level characters, and we each take a turn DMing a room for each other.
That'd be fun.
But every time it'd be different characters.
We'd have to pre-make those 20 level characters.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it takes me a long time to make a character. Got to figure out all the little intricacies of every little part of his personality before I can set him on the road.
That is one thing I do like about this game is it seems very simplistic in the character creation, where some other games, specifically, I'm looking at you, old school Wizard of the Coast, are very, very, very convoluted and challenging to create.
Mm-hmm.
And fifth edition toned that down a lot, but it's still a lot. Where in Magic School Mystery, it seems a lot simpler, to just make a character, which is perfect also for younger audiences to get into this type of system.
Oh yeah, definitely. That was very important for us. Especially it's like you're playing middle schoolers, and I definitely know there's younger folks out there who love these types of stories, and this would be a game for them too. But because the game is so focused on what the story is, it doesn't have to have mechanics for every situation, which has done us the favor of having a simpler character sheet that you can just roll into and bring to the table and start checking off boxes and be ready to play almost immediately.
And there aren't a lot of TTRPGs that do that.
No, not many.
Many are very like, okay, you need a character creating session in order to play this game.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Session 0, as it were. I do really enjoy the communal aspect of the just like getting into the game immediately and being like, oh, this is give name of student, and then you and your entire party take the time to sit down and basically write the story, the beginning of the story together, rather than it being a pre-made thing like most of the D&D books are.
I think that's probably one of my favorite parts about this game, actually, is how we've made character creation start after you start the game. So you start role-playing and telling the story first, and then as you start doing, then you start filling your character sheet, as, you meet each other as friends at the school, and, you go to your first magic school class, and so you kind of have your own miniature Session 0 within the first 30 minutes of the game.
Right. And that's important, because I know that we've been talking about a Session 0 for an upcoming actual play, and it's just like, okay, we need a couple of hours. How are we going to work this around all of our schedules? And then once that's done, we need to wait again to go play. When by the end of Session 0, we're all going to be like, let's play now.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Exactly. There's so much, we love this character. It's so cool. And you just want to get going.
I've been on that boat for like 3 weeks since I finished the character creation to begin with.
I was going to say, I don't think a day's gone by where you don't text me like, hey, when are we starting Session 0? Ask Ryan. Bother him.
That's not 100% true. There's been at least one day. At least one day in between.
Mm-hmm.
So what does it take for future TTRPG creators to get from the concept to the creation?
That's a pretty good question. And I think the most important thing from a beginner, I'm still very much a beginner game designer, from a beginner's viewpoint, is it's the playtest. You just have to get it out there and throw it on the table and watch your friends tear it apart and break it and all those horrible things, because you can have an idea for forever and you can be playing around these mechanics in your mind or writing it down, but the best thing to make a game move is having someone actually play it, and then that just moves the process along very quickly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, rather than having just a concept in your head and you being the only one knowing anything about it. Really puts a stunt in that whole process.
Right. So I would say even start with your favorite RPG game and then just start picking some mechanics and throwing them out and stuffing your own mechanics into it to start with. Like you're modifying a car. And that's all you need to start your first playtest. It doesn't have to be a completely original game when you start, because you're going to have time to work on it. And so just as long as you have, the prototype with this heavily modified Dungeons & Dragons game, your players start playtesting it, then next playtest, throw some more mechanics out and switch in some new ones.
Interesting. Also, yeah, I can definitely see that pushing that process along really well. I remember back in college, my buddy Will and myself, we wanted to, not to do like a TTRPG, but we wanted to make video games like for a living, basically. So we spent, I think it was probably 8 to 10 hours a day over a series of like 3 or 4 weeks, just writing out this whole big story about this crazy RPG we wanted to do. We wrote down like the lore of the world, the creatures you'd encounter, just basically the entirety of everything within a 4-week period. And then we couldn't find anybody to help us, like to actually take the information we had and create like an actual video game around it. So it kind of just fell off, sadly. But if I can find those notes, I feel like that might be a good stepping stone to make like a TTRPG out of that instead. Now that comes up,
right? And it's all about the stepping stones, like you said. And also, I think scope's very important. Not trying to reinvent the wheel or creating your own Dungeons and Dragons. Just start small, and then the small things build.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
So the one emphasis in the game was that the dungeon master, so to speak, which we know as them as, is a headmistress or headmaster. So what is different for the DM perspective, or the HM in this case, for this game versus like another different TTRPG?
I would say probably the biggest difference between being, the headmaster, headmistress, or a dungeon master is the amount of work you're asked to do. Because a magical mystery asks the players and the game runner to do almost an equal amount of work, or at least that's the design we're trying to head towards. It comes with the philosophy that it's not only the dungeon master's responsibility for the players to have fun, but equally the player's responsibility for the dungeon master to have fun. And the kind of idea we're all here telling a story together. And so the players are actually going to be asked to come up with some things about the world. And so that's a double-edged sword for the dungeon master or the headmaster. Is on one hand, and I've DM'd like this before, it's so much easier when you can say, hey, Jerry, tell me what that mountain is over there. What is it named? Why is it important? And then they tell you, and they're like, it's true. I'm put it on my map right now. But then also you have to give up control, and you have to trust your players. There is this game is kind of asking the dungeon master to say, okay, I trust that you want to have fun, and you're going to make choices that make us all have fun. Now, of course, the headmaster is still the conductor, the game runner, and they're still the one who can, say, well, hey, that doesn't really fit the theme, or how do other people feel about this, and they can modify things. But the big difference is we're sharing and the privilege of world building and storytelling with the players.
Yeah, definitely. Just another version of that communal aspect that I find super super entertaining and super interesting.
I do like that. I do like that concept, and I try to do it a little bit in my own games that I run. For example, in my Monday game that I DM, we recently skipped ahead a couple of months. And that was purely because I wanted to jump them from 8th level to 11th level.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, let's explain how we did this. So I gave them all homework, so to speak, and said, think of somebody that you became close to in the world, or in the city that you're in. They could be anybody. Think of a reason why you did missions for a particular family, and think about what you've done over the last 4 months. And I used that information to tweak the world to fit this party versus me just saying, oh, this is what you've done.
That's a pretty cool idea.
And it makes them a little bit closer to their NPCs and to their mob boss family type thing, and to each other.
There was I got this advice from a YouTuber. I forget who it was, but it was a YouTube channel that talks about D&D tips and advice. And what they said was, the number one best way to get players to care about your plot is to have the players make up the plot. So what you did just there was great. Is you say, okay, well, what did you do? And now you can take something they've mentioned in there when they wrote it down for you and say, okay, I'm going to make this more important, because then they're going to really care about that.
Right. And that actually ended up working out, because one of the 4 decided that they were going to become closer to another family, while the other 3 were like, no, we like this family. And that led down a rabbit hole of, hey, would you sell information to your family that you heard from the other family, even though they are enemies?
Drama.
And that led to a really fun night, honestly and truly. It was amazing. And I was really intrigued how the party reacted, because I thought this can go 2 ways. But mostly I thought they would say, oh, well, forget that guy, he's against us. Instead, they're like, okay, well, how can we make this work for all of us and get you off the hook? So now it's like that's leading down more paths that I didn't even think about. So it was interesting. And give up a little bit of reign if you're a DM. You don't have to control every step and railroad the situation. It makes things so much more fun.
For sure, I agree with that 100%.
Oh yeah, mm-hmm. I think some games out there, they talk about the philosophy of play to find out. As a dungeon master, try not to know everything. Find out as you play, so the story's happening to you as it's happening to the players.
Yeah, for sure. You get more genuine reactions out of everybody that way, including yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think on another D&D podcast that I listen to. Not another. I think it's called Not Another D&D podcast, or NADPod. Speaking of the whole like communal storytelling type thing, the DM there has his wife is a character, and she starts spitting out all these crazy things that are from her hometown and all this other stuff. So he's writing it down the entire time. And I guess recently they just went to her hometown, and he made sure to include every little thing that she mentioned in the actual hometown, which I thought was really cool, because it was just something that she was just spouting out random stuff, and he made it a thing.
I love when DMs do that.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
I had that happen with my Friday game. My DM focuses, or like, will take every little thing you say and write it down. So there were things that I forgot I said, like my brother's name in character. Like, it wasn't imperative to the story, but I was like, oh yeah, da 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 da, his name was blah blah blah, or something like that. And she brought it up later. I was like, wait, I had a brother? Crap.
Oh, I remember hearing about that on the Questions for a Dungeon Master episode.
Yeah. And yesterday we had two people had to call out last minute. So we did a one-shot type thing with our characters. And my character found out that her family, who's been under this protective service, were found. And she immediately was like, we gotta go save them. And some of those things came up again because we went to go see them and rescue them, including her full name, which nobody knew beforehand. And now one of them knows her full name. So that's going to be interesting, because she got yelled at for cursing by her mom.
That's really funny.
And of course, it had to be a full name.
Yeah, of course. All right. So we do have some audience questions. I asked on Twitter
Oh, exciting.
what people would like to know. Some of the questions we have already answered. So Ellen_Delina, who is the host for Birdhouse Mist, a D&D podcast, she asked about what other pieces of media inspired your game, which we've discussed already. So that was the Worst Witch series.
Mm-hmm. I love that series. It's really cute.
Dice Populi, which is another D&D podcast, they asked, what is your favorite mechanic that you introduced, and or what is make or break for you in the new system?
Oh, let's see. Well, if it's not the combining starting character creation after you start the story, I think mechanic-wise, it's going to be the spellcasting system. And you see in this game, you don't have a list of predetermined spells. What happens when you cast a spell, or when you learn a spell, is the GM, their headmaster, turns to you and says, okay, tell me what the spell is, and you make it up. And there's a list of 3 criteria that you have to follow. The spell cannot inflict dramatic harm because you're kids. The spell has to reveal an insight into your character. And then, let's see, 3, I'm blanking on the third one. But so you have these rules you go by, but then you just make it up. And so you can have basically any spell. And of course, the headmaster can, modify it and ask you to do something different. But I think that is also a make or break mechanic for me, specifically because when I was looking for a game that would tell a wizard school story to play with my friends, I found some, but I really didn't want to use a long spell list, because either you have this really long in-depth list and you have to stop play to look through it,
Mm-hmm.
or the list is not long enough and you can't cast spells you should be able to cast as a student.
Yeah, that's very fair. While I was reading through the playtest book, that one thing that I was like, oh my god, that's so cool! Like you can just create a spell you want. It's just a free world for you. Like, it was like my favorite thing I read about.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. And partially the reason why it's so important to me, apart from what I just said, is the genre of the theme of wizard school stories. Magic is never really that hard and fast. There's not really that many rules of magic.
Mm-hmm.
It just, magic solves everything. And it's the go-to thing that happens. And so I didn't want magic in this game to be a tactical decision like you would with, abilities in Dungeons and Dragons, just because in the stories of these types, magic just happens and it's very flippant and nonchalant usually, and like, oh, I can do that.
Greg mentioned earlier when we were talking about it once we both read it, he mentioned that it's similar to Monster of the Week with the magic system, and it clicked that it very much is, because Monster of the Week is very much, you have these abilities, but you have to tell me what you're doing with it and how you're doing it. And then I'll tell you how it works once you explain it. So it's very much, you can use fire magic or healing magic, but you don't technically have a spell called fireball or firebolt. You just have the ability to use fire, and you tell me how you're doing it. And I do like that system. It does require a lot more imagination.
I think that system is the evolution of people realizing with Dungeons and Dragons that you can just reflavor things.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Like, you can look at the weapons list and say, well, I want to roll a D6, but I don't want it to be a sword. So can this please be a fishing rod?
Absolutely. I have no issue with that statement.
Greg's next character is going to just be a fisherman.
Yeah, I've been writing everything down, so it's going to be quite an amalgamation.
If you fish dire fish, then that becomes quite, quite a sturdy character, quite a hero.
Dire fish. Got it. I haven't written down this much in a long time, especially not on an episode of the podcast.
So DM Patman, he asks, what do you feel you can bring to the community that is new and unique with this game or other games?
That's a very good question. I think what I'm bringing to the community is it's going to be a two-parter. The first thing is I'm bringing enjoyment that is a low barrier to entry. It's very simple to start playing. You can just bring it to your D&D group and say, hey, I'm going to play this for, a session or two. You plop it on the table. You start playing immediately, and there's not much prep. Mm-hmm. And also, it doesn't outstay its welcome. So you can just slot things in, and so it has its own niche in the ecosystem of the games in your roster. And then I think the second thing that we're bringing is a way to tell school stories. I think there's several RPGs out there that take place in school, but with this game we break it into scenes, just like Band the Man, Save the Music. We call them chapters in this case. We break them into very specific chapters. Mm-hmm. And because of that enables role play to naturally occur over multiple weeks in game. So you can sit down at the table and play an entire mystery over the course of a whole school year. Because you're having months pass in between important events, but it's just happening seamlessly as you would, go on an adventure at D&D.
Those are very good. I like that this is also very open to a younger audience, where D&D can be played by younger people, but I think it's a little intimidating, like I mentioned earlier, mm-hmm. for a new person to sit down at the table. And even as an adult, it's intimidating for a lot of people. I've spoken to quite a few people who are like, oh, I've always wanted to try it, but there's all those books and rules and math.
It's very true. Yeah. I babysit a few kids, and I run D&D for them when I do it. And so I've definitely had to adapt how I run D&D and even present it when I'm working with them.
That's super cool. It's always good to get the younger audience into this kind of a thing.
Oh yeah, they're great. They love it, and I'm trying to get them to DM their own games and start telling their own stories because they're all storytellers.
Oh, that's awesome.
There's been some stories I've seen online about parents running their kids through games, and it is so wholesome for some of them.
Always.
There was one that I love to this day, and I think it was a father, and he was running it for his daughter and her friends, and there was some wolves that came up and were like, they're going to attack you, and they're like, oh, the puppy, and then they start petting the dog and roll an animal handling check, and now they just have a pack of wolves as their like familiars because they rolled so well. And it was so cute.
A lot of kids have lots of really clever ways to solve problems without violence. And that's just really cool to see.
That's very true.
Especially with, with the quarantine still happening, and, a lot of folks aren't bringing their kids back to school as it starts up and they're homeschooling them. Mm-hmm. I've heard talk about D&D and role-playing games being brought into a homeschool setting. I think I would really like to see that become a more popular way to use role-playing games.
Absolutely. Make it educational. Not super educational, mind you, but...
Yeah. Role-playing games can teach a lot of things, and you don't have to be a child to do it. It could teach you empathy. It can teach you... For me, particularly, it taught me how to be more outspoken
Mhm.
because I'm very much a shy person, and playing face characters, so to speak, or bards and charismatic people forced me to learn how to do those things, which helped me do it better as an actual person.
And who says you don't learn anything from playing games?
Right. And I think that helps with kids specifically, because you can teach them how to respond to controlled situations in a controlled environment and see how they handle it, and show them that if they handle it poorly, so to speak, or with violence, there could be consequences for their actions, or if they handle it appropriately, there could be positive things that happen. And that is a good lesson for everybody to learn.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
On top of that, not only like the violence and how to handle it differently, but even just showing them that they do have the power in any way to handle it. That there's always, a solution or a way to go about things, and they don't have to. There's always a way,
even if it's not immediately apparent. Always good to massage the imagination.
Mm-hmm.
There was a couple of questions from one person, but I think we covered most of them. This was from UAC Podcast, or Unearthed Our Canon. What message, if any, do you have for our audience that is core to you and might be helpful to them?
I think this is a good thought. Here's my message. So stories are extremely important to a lot of us. I mean, of course, we play Dungeons and Dragons and all the role-playing games. That's all story-based. But this game, it's inspired by some stories that have huge impact on so many people in their childhood. And the thing about that is that these stories, while they were written by someone else or created by someone and they're outside influences, they do exist within us. And we can take control and ownership of them in some ways. And so it's like the way creating this game was in some ways a way that I took control and ownership of Wizard School stories for myself and made it my own. And so how these stories, they're an entity by themselves, and they go beyond creation, basically. And that each one of us has a very unique and specific connection to those stories.
I think that's a good message.
Yeah, absolutely. Better than anything I could come up with.
I try not to make it too poetic.
That was good. I liked it.
Yeah, games are an amazing way to just have fun and participate with friends and get closer to your friends. I absolutely adore our Thursday night games when we play them, and just getting to hang out with my best friend and my husband and Greg and their roommates, and just like playing with people.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it doesn't always work out. Sometimes you don't always enjoy everybody at your table, but for the most part, when you find a good group, then you're freaking good. Hold on to them.
Yeah, for sure. It's a very strong sense of community.
Good groups are very important. I think,
hard to come by too, sadly.
Play in general is just such a fundamental human exercise. I mean, like, of course, as kids, we play all the time, but I don't think we lose that as much as we might think we do, because we might be playing differently now, but it's still an act of play. And I think it's, it is fundamentally human. Just how stories and storytelling is fundamentally human. Yeah,
absolutely.
So what can you tell us about the Kickstarter that goes live on the 4th?
Well, let's see. It's gonna have the cover art. I'm very excited about it. We just got it in now, and we have this wonderful artist, Liz Borum, who is doing it for us, and it's going to be amazing. And you can get a PDF version or a hard copy. And I'm really excited for you guys to check it out. I think it's going to do very important things for this type of storytelling and tabletop RPGs.
And do you have any other games out or future games that you have in your mind?
I have a few games out, but none that are commercially out. I have a bunch of ones that I've dabbled on and just made for fun on the side. But this is going to be, it's my second one I've made that's commercial, but this is going to be the big one that is going to stay out. We also have a Discord for Magic School Mystery that I think you can find the link if you poke around Twitter or Reddit.
We can also add it to the description.
That'd be lovely.
Oh, definitely. I'll be joining that for sure.
I appreciate it. We're running playtests there. And playtests are going to continue throughout the Kickstarter and then beyond. We have about 40 hours of playtests under our belt. But we always need more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of playtests, we did talk about a little bit about how there's a possibility that we can all do a playtest and record
Oh yeah,
it.
definitely.
And then I think we could share that as well on here and get our little feet in the water of 11-year-old kids again.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So keep an eye out for that. I can't tell you when it's going to happen yet, but it will come out, and we'll make sure to time it so it's during the Kickstarter.
Well, I appreciate it. I really enjoy being on. And I mean, I just love talking about role-playing games. I mean,
You and me both.
Don't we all, for sure.
Mhm.
My inner child is already screaming for the 11-year-old magic school thing.
well, thank you folks very much. This is great.
No problem. No.
Well, thanks for being on, for
Oh
sure.
yeah, no problem.
Yeah. So that is the end of the episode. Thank you guys so much for joining. Please go check out Tanner's Kickstarter, which we will add the link in the description once we have it and it is live. So go support them, even if it's just to share. I know times are hard right now. We'll share it on Twitter. So you can find us there on Beholder to No One or on Facebook at Beholder to No One. And you can listen to these podcasts wherever podcasts are found. Where can they find you, Tanner?
Oh, let's see. Well, you can. I have an email. It's Tanner J, just the letter J, Will WIL @gmail.com.
Okay. And thank you so much for joining. This was great. This was a lot of fun to talk about Magic School mysteries.
I had a blast.
And we'll see you next week, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.